Howdy, welcome back. Really good to see you again. I don't really know what to say. I guess we should just start. Let's just go for it. I don't know, is there anything you want to say before we begin? Insightful, amazing, incredible. I love you. Okay. Also, if at any point you feel like I sound a little bit sick, a little bit congested, I don't actually, and you're making that up. Okay. Let's begin. So a couple months ago, I read an article that was really, really fascinating, and it was all about the Scythians. That is what I want to go over today, and I essentially want to talk about the Scythians as an ancient culture and some really new and exciting things that we've found out about them very recently. Now, I don't know how many of you would ever have heard of the Scythians before. They were a nomadic people of ancient Eurasia who inhabited the steppes from like the 9th century BC to the 1st century BC. They probably originated in what is now Iran and would have spread across Ukraine and Russia. And they were a really incredibly formidable force in this part of the world for the entirety of their existence there, particularly because of their exceptional equestrian skills and their just absolutely crazy military capabilities. They had a nomadic lifestyle, which was like a decentralized social structure, and they formed a very, very important part of this place and time in history. It's very hard to know a lot about them. The archaeological evidence we have for this culture is mainly found in their burial mounds or kurgans, and these contain grave goods and, a lot of material culture that we can use to piece together their existence. But apart from their fun burial mounds, there isn't a lot we know about them because they left no written record of themselves. So we have to take accounts from outsiders like the Assyrians, the Persians, the Greeks, etc. to kind of piece together who these people were. And although they existed alongside all these cultures, they don't seem to hold as much of a place of relevance in the general knowledge today. And they're often overlooked even in the historical record when looking at Indo-European peoples. And here at Fig Tree Productions, we just don't stand for that. No culture is ever lacking in historical relevance, despite how much we know about them. So today I'm going to teach you about the Scythians. Unfortunately, a lot of stuff that may be known about them comes from wrong stuff. I'd like to highlight Shakespeare in this section of the video. So in Shakespeare's play King Lear, definitely bottom 5 Shakespeare plays for me, he uses the Scythian name when the titular character disowns his daughter Cordelia. King Lear, right out of the gate, disowns his daughter Cordelia for not loving him enough, and he calls on the natural forces to assist him in disowning his daughter. In doing so, he compares her to a barbarous Scythian who eats their own children, essentially saying her treatment of him is as barbaric as the Scythians, and insinuating that the Scythians cannibalize their own children. Throughout history, Scythians have had this very violent reputation. I live near a church. But how much weight can we put into these secondary accounts of their existence when obviously, like I said, they don't have any written record of their own? Well, let's go over their existence in the historical record. They're initially introduced through small references in the works of Hesiod and Homer. And in these texts, they emerge as quite enigmatic figures, a little bit mysterious, a little bit not like other girls. Homer characterizes the Scythians as horsemen engaged in close combat who drink mare's milk. He gives a bit of a value judgment, proclaiming that they are the most righteous of men. And Hesiod drops some backstory lore and says that their founder discovered how to smelt bronze, and he also references them drinking mare's milk. Now, Herodotus is really the one we look at for information about the Scythians. He's one of these so-called important historical figures, and he consolidates information about the various Scythian tribes. Basically talks about their origins, histories, and their customs. Herodotus meticulously catalogues facts about their social and military behavior. Besides their hardcore tactic of shooting arrows from horseback, from bows actually, which were one of the earliest composite bow designs. They also used battle axes, maces, lances, swords. Because of their ability to stay on the move, like I said, they were a nomadic people. Herodotus says the Scythians were invincible and impossible to approach. Lots of nations really wanted the Scythians on their side, so these guys would basically get called up and asked to be on everyone's army, because if you have a Scythian, no one's beating the Scythians. And a lot of nations brought them into military service. And this I'm quoting, because they're just metal as fuck. In 490 BC, their mounted archers assisted the Persians against the Greeks at the Battle of Marathon, and again at the Battle of Plataea in 479 BC. Apparently, they were also essential in Pompey's defeat of Mithridates VI in 63 BC as well. Everyone wanted a piece of that. Now, through these historical accounts, we sort of see this idea of the Scythian as a noble savage come into play, with Ephorus, who was a big fan of theirs, calling them just, generous, frugal, and highly virtuous. Basically what this term noble savage means is that the ancient Greeks are grappling with the fact that other cultures can exist separate from them and engage in different cultural practices and yet still be highly functioning and even admirable society. The ancient Greeks seem to be really quite fond of the Scythians, despite labeling generally anyone who wasn't Greek as barbaric. which is obviously where we get the term barbaric from, the ancient Greeks, an inclusive little bunch. Basically, the ancient Greeks would use the term varvaros to describe any and all foreigners, and the word varvaros is onomatopoeic and comes from the term varvar, which is like a mocking sound, which would be what any other language other than ancient Greek sounds like. Then it gets condensed into varvaros, and that basically just means foreigner. Now it has a very negative implication, so great. Thanks, guys, for that one. However, not everyone was so fond of the Scythians. Ovid particularly didn't like them. He was exiled among them, and he dismisses them as vastly inferior to civilized nations. Basically, the girls are fighting over whether or not you can be civilized if you're not from Rome or Greece. And the Scythians really had them stumped on this because they were cool as shit and people didn't want to admit that you could be cool if you weren't from Greece. Also, there was their image of being absolutely ruthless towards their enemies. Herodotus claims that a Scythian drinks the blood of the first man he has overthrown. But how much can we really trust Herodotus? Well, remember that new study that I was talking about at the beginning of this video? That study would argue that maybe we can actually kind of trust him quite a bit. Okay, let's recap. So Herodotus was a Greek historian alive during the 400s BC, and he's best known for his work, The Histories, which details the entirety of the Greco-Persian Wars. He was dubbed the father of history by this totally irrelevant Roman statesman, lawyer, scholar, philosopher, writer, and academic skeptic Cicero. Herodotus is honestly the reason we have a lot of the information we do have about the Mediterranean region in this time, and even further up into the Black Sea region as well. Although he has often been criticized for getting a little bit excited and maybe embellishing or extrapolating his tales a little bit. The historian Thucydides, who was also around at the same time, accused him of making up stories for entertainment, but maybe he was just jealous. Herodotus claims he just reported what he could see and what he was told. Okay, king, I guess we'll take your word for it. And when it comes to the Scythians, that's what we did for a long time. We just took his word for it. When looking at historical accounts like Herodotus, it's always important that if they're the only thing we have to go off of, to try and back it up with archaeological evidence and not just take it at face value. And now, just recently with this new paper, we can start to see some archaeological evidence for some of Herodotus's claims about the Scythians. In a paper published in December of 2023, we have some new evidence which basically proves Herodotus's claims of the Scythians being metal as fuck. This study recognizes that leather was one of the most important materials for the nomadic Scythians, which was used for clothing, shoes, quivers, but that our knowledge regarding the animal species used to make this leather was quite limited. So these guys analyzed the proteins present in 45 samples of leather and 2 fur objects recovered from 18 burials excavated at 14 different Scythian sites in southern Ukraine. Mammoth task. Incredible work, guys. The results demonstrated that the Scythians primarily used domesticated species like sheep, goat, and cattle for their leather, and then for their fur they used wild animal fur like fox and squirrel and feline species. Pretty average, I guess, not too exciting, but where it gets really interesting is that the study discovered the presence of 2 human skin samples, which for the first time provides direct archaeological evidence for Herodotus's claim that the Scythians used the skin of their dead enemies to manufacture leather trophy items such as quiver covers. Other Scythian customs also described by Herodotus have also been able to be backed up with some evidence. A recent investigation of the Alexandropol burial mound revealed a large funerary feasting area with 11 accompanying burials of men and women, and they seem to have been killed and buried as a part of the funerary rites for the royal occupant in the mound. So they were killed kind of sacrificially to this royal, which aligned with how Herodotus described a Scythian king's funeral. This is such an incredible discovery. It essentially enhances the reliability of historians like Herodotus when something like this happens. And like I said, sometimes he's been accused of embellishing stories, but when a lot of the time all we have to go off is these stories, we really want to know how reliable they are or if we should be discounting them entirely. This study also sheds so much light on the customs of the Scythians. Their burial mounds contain a lot of grave goods. It's kind of hard to put together the symbolic meaning of grave goods when you don't have an idea of the culture's symbolism. So when you get material culture like this, like a quiver made of human skin, it provides a more comprehensive view of Scythian life beyond the spectacular artifacts that you find in elite graves. I was just so blown away when I read this study. It's so beautiful when we can align what these ancient people would have been experiencing with something tangible like archaeological evidence. And it just makes the past that much more accessible and exciting to us in the present. Or the future. But I suppose the question still remains, why the fuck did they do this? For what reason did you make a quiver cover out of human skin? Barry Cunliffe, a professor at Oxford, seems to have an idea. I wonder if what lies behind it is that in possessing some part of what you're hunting, be it human or animal, you gain extra power over them. The belief being that your arrows are guided to your prey by their being kept in proximity to their skin. Herodotus also says that the Scythians decorated their horses with the heads of their enemies. Could the thought be that the heads not only displayed your valor, but guided you to your prey? Essentially using some vanquished part of the animal you're hunting guides you to it. I believe it, I believe it. I would also like to note another insanely cool thing about the Scythians, which is that they were like heavily tatted. A lot of the physical remains of Scythians we found have had like markings and tattoos on their body. The designs usually covered like their arms and sort of upper torso area, and sometimes like even down like the side of their legs as well. And they were mostly zoomorphic, so they were all abstract versions of animals. And this makes me think possessing a part of the animal you're hunting maybe will help you hunt it, because there's this like stag motif that comes up a lot in Scythian tattoos. There's also the griffin that comes up quite a lot, which is obviously a mythological animal. I don't know what that means. This Scythian chieftain is a really wonderfully preserved body, which shows the tattoos that he had all up his arms and on his chest. Men and women have been found to be tattooed, and there are accounts that Scythian women would teach other women how to tattoo themselves. That's so beautiful. Some have argued that the tattoos are supposed to have some kind of magical protection element. Maybe that's why there are the mythological creatures like griffins. Otherwise, they could be seen as a sign of bravery. Like I said, they would be tattoos of animals that they would have hunted. So maybe if you got a tattoo of this animal, it shows that you were able to defeat it, or that you're brave in the face of hunting this animal. Obviously, there's no way to know what these tattoos mean, unless Herodotus has anything to say about them, because apparently he's the be-all end-all in this conversation. Anyways, I'm gonna leave you guys there. You have much to think about, so I'll let you ruminate with that. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about the Scythians. They're cool. If you have any fun facts about the Scythians, anything I neglected to say, please let me know. I'm gonna go. I have to blow my nose. Okay, bye.